Hi, my name's Eva Echo. My pronouns are she, they. I am an activist and a public speaker. Now, you might know of the Met from the media, but the Met is much more than what you hear about on the news. The Met is full of people working within it, and that's exactly who they are, people. People of all intersections, just like you and I, and people that want to make a difference for the better. Although you might not hear about that, we're here today to shed some light on it. For Lesbian Visibility Week 2023, I'm here at New Scotland Yard, and we're going to be having an important and honest conversation. I'm delighted to be joined by 4 members of the Met who are also part of the LGBTQ+ community. So without further ado, I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Colleen. I'm a detective sergeant at the Metropolitan Police. My pronoun is she, her.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm a PC based in Specialist Operations, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, my name's Rebecca. I'm an inspector based in HR for the resourcing team.
Hi, my name's Kate Fletcher. I work in learning and development. I'm a police officer and mostly work with people strategy.
Thank you. It's great to have you here today. So let's dive right in then. First of all, I want to start with something that many people will be thinking about and wanting to ask. And that is, what's it like to be LGBTQ+ and a member of the Met as well? So Rebecca, if you want to start us off.
On the whole, it's pretty good. It's a safe place to be. I don't know what the others found, but I'm quite happy telling people about my sexuality. I'm bisexual. I haven't had any massive problems. That's my personal experience, and I feel quite safe talking about that and being me. So it's been a pretty positive experience on the whole. I don't know about everybody else.
It's really great to hear. Colleen, how have you found it?
For me personally, I had a few issues when I was in my probation. That was many moons ago now. But I'm a confident person. So when somebody was being either homophobic or put me in a situation where I felt uncomfortable, I always basically stepped up to the mark and challenged them on it. But I know that's not the same for other people. But for me, going forward in terms of after my probation, it's been great. I've never hid who I am as a person. I'm just Colleen, whether I'm gay, straight, whatever, doesn't matter. I'm just me, so I can only be me.
Firstly, the majority of the Met don't care whether you're gay, straight, bi, anything else. However, there's kind of a double-edged sword. So I have a son who's 10, and what I would say from my perspective is sometimes I think people can illegitimize your relationships and your parental status and the value as well as your role as well, as in you only got that job because you tick 2 boxes or 3 boxes as the case may be. So that I find really frustrating because it does illegitimize. And as an example with regards to the parenting, I know that I get questions that other like heterosexual colleagues wouldn't have. So for example, I've been asked whether he's actually mine. He actually is, if anyone's wondering, and whether I actually had him, which I did, but for my ex-partner, who's his other mum, that illegitimizes her relationship to him, which I really am not a fan of whatsoever. And the illegitimizing your relationships, as in it's not really a marriage. I know you've just got married, so you probably don't want to hear that, but I've heard that as well. You're not really whatever it is, you're not really the mum, you're not really married. Generally, I think it's actually a really good place to belong, and I forget to come out. I forget it's a thing we have to do a lot of the time. I assume people know, and so I do sometimes forget, and they're like, who are you talking about? Who is this she? Who is your partner? I was like, oh yeah, you don't know. And people make the assumption that I'm straight as well because I have a son, so that just really confuses things. But then on the flip side, there can be comments that are unwanted, and but the biggest thing that bothers me at the moment is being illegitimized in some of my huge successes of my life, and that's my son, my relationship, and some of my work successes are them. So yeah, balanced.
Same love is not accepted as normal love, or as people would say is normal love, but same love is normal love in our world, and it should be the same in everybody's world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have you found it, Hannah?
So just to sort of build off what you're saying, I think absolutely there is a certain element of illegitimization by people, but I think that's from a small minority, but they can be a very loud minority and impact other people. Because at the end of the day, you know, there's, as you say, there's a large percentage of people in the Met, just in regular society, that they don't care. They're just like, you're you, how you are determines how I'm going to treat you, not what your characteristics are, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But I think to sort of build on what Carleen was saying as well, it's about having that strength to challenge those little comments that come at you, or the little things that people say that cause that illegitimization of your experience or what your life is, because we should all be respected. I think that one of the most important things that I've found in the Met is having a network of people around me who understand my experience, people from the LGBT community that I can sort of vent to or talk to about what it's like to be in our situation. Although that's kind of the next question, isn't it? Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that brings us nicely on to the next question. So even during Ida Hobbit, which is the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia, lesbophobia is lumped in with homophobia by a lot of people because they just assume it's covered in that. But the truth is more than that, isn't it? Because it's important we recognise that being a queer woman involves very different experiences to queer men. So how do we create space for queer women within the Met? Kate, if you want to start on that one.
In an organisation that is predominantly made up of men, you know, and it is disproportionately so, I think it's really difficult to carve out that space, and we've spoken before about it actually being a societal problem. So my experiences of being a gay woman and experiences of being a bi person, yeah, good, are so different from gay men in particular. And I mean, examples of that is women who have sex with women are, what's it called, where you fantasize? It's a fetish, yeah, fetishize, yeah, it's a sexual thing. It's something, you know, people, oh, I'd love it if my girlfriend, that kind of, and I've heard that before, you know. But when it's about gay men, it's not. It's not because, you know, it's against the law. It was very much deemed in society before as dirty, and that's where you contract diseases from, which obviously is horrendous, and we shouldn't be associating anybody's sex life unless it is against the law and not acceptable, just to clarify, as with the police. However, you've got two extremes there. You've got one that's being fetishized, whereas men, it's the opposite. And it's not, people don't want to know, you know, whereas they do. And I think I've been asked about my sex life. I don't know whether everybody, I'm sure everybody, I could tell by the faces, they all have been. And, you know, I just wouldn't do that to a heterosexual person or to a gay man. So that's one real big difference. So how can we make sure we're included in violence against women and girls, because it's different than heterosexual women? How can we make sure that our experiences as LGBTQ plus women are valid?
It's finding that equality, isn't it? Like you were saying earlier, that illegitimacy of, you know, certain questions, it's almost an attack on your identity. But then, Hannah, how have you found that as well?
I can definitely relate to some of the stuff you're saying about being, you know, those overly intrusive questions. But I sort of turned that on its head a little bit, because when I'm very open to having conversations about pretty much anything. Some of the most enlightening conversations I've had at work have been with people who've had calm and well thought out reasoned debate with me about why gay marriage shouldn't be legal, for example, or why the trans experience isn't valid. They're trying to convince me, whereas I'm sort of sat there going, I'm going to listen to what your perspective is, but I'm going to give you some information for you to think about so that they can form a different opinion. And I've always taken those opportunities where someone has done something intrusive or has done something that's crossing a line, where I've sort of identified it as an opportunity where I can go, hang on a second, mate. Why do we think like that? Why do you think it's okay to ask me? And I've never gotten angry with anyone, because I just think that shuts people down straight away. I'm very much the sort of person who will talk to anyone about anything. I can completely disagree, and I'll be clear I disagree with what they're saying, but I want to understand why. And eventually, if you talk to people enough and get them to say why they actually think what they think, eventually they kind of give up, because there won't be a good reason behind it. It'll be because they read it in a religious text, or they've heard it, or they've seen it in a TV show. And my sort of philosophy in life is just trying to help people see a different path, but it's for them to see it, not me. And some of those conversations I've had with people who have not believed in gay marriage, and these are people who have been completely professional with me at work, treated me with the utmost respect, always asked me how my partner is. They've changed their opinions based on that. And same for colleagues that have had some very deep concerns about, for example, trans issues, but have never met a trans person. And when I'm able to offer them a little different experience, I'm not personally trans, but I know plenty of trans people, I can offer them something else that helps them change their perspective. And then they've actually come to me months later and gone, hang on, Hannah, actually, you know, because we've had these conversations, I've changed my mind, or I've learned something new. I'm willing to go to Pride, or I'm willing to do something different that puts them outside of their comfort zone. And while it is a very slowly approach, I found it quite effective. But I know it takes a lot of patience, and you know.
It does. And I'm happy to have those conversations, and I do. And I have these conversations in front of hundreds of people to bring that out. I mean, part of the training we do for diversity was who agrees with who thinks same-sex parents are as effective as heterosexual parents. And it's a very small minority. And the point of that is to get people really, really talking and then talking about. And then I come out, I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, you've all assumed that I'm a heterosexual, but, and then you can see people, one, wishing the earth was going to open up and swallow them whole, and two, actually it changing their opinion slightly. But on the flip side of that, it shouldn't be, because I remember those comments. You know, I remember the man, the sergeant, asking me whether or not my son has any male influence. I remember the inspector telling me that my marriage wasn't a real marriage, because it hurts. You know, that's something that I can, and actually I find it really difficult to challenge, like you were saying. Well, you weren't, you were saying you're quite confident, and I'll have your back all day long. But if somebody says something to me that's personal, I find it really difficult because it jars me a bit. I don't have the resilience to straight away be able to come back with something. But if they say something about you, I've got your back. But if it's about me, I can't really struggle with it.
But I think that's part of like the experience of the way we've been conditioned by society as women, is that there's a lot of self-doubt put into us from a very young age, and it's really hard to counter that. I know it's something I struggle with, what you were describing, being able to back other people to the hilt 100% all the time. Absolutely, I'm there. But when it comes to when I've had unfortunate comments to me that have crossed that actually crossed that line where I've gone, oh, I actually need to do something about this. In that particular moment, it's been hard for me to, you know, deliver the amount of force behind the challenge that I'd wanted to. In hindsight, like I've still challenged it, but it's not been enough.
Well, I mean, as a proud trans woman of colour, I can relate to all of that. But I mean, I have like internalised transphobia, internalised racism, homophobia, and that sort of stuff stays with you. And Carleen, like as a person of colour, how do you find creating that space? Not just for queer women, but queer women of colour as well.
To be honest, I find my colour as being more of a barrier than my sexuality. And when I say that is, when you see me, you see a black woman, right? I can't get rid of it. You know, that doesn't wash off if this is who I am, right? But you can hide your sexuality. It's up to you whether you come out and say, I'm gay, this is my partner, da, da, da. It's up to you to do that. But your colour, you can't hide. So coming from that perspective and then having to build on top of that, oh my God, I've just fought this battle, now I have to fight another battle. And people of colour often think, is it worth it? Because I've gone through all that just by looking at me. Is it now worth it putting an added layer on top of that to then get all the discrimination and everything that comes on top of that as well? And as a person of colour, you know, being gay is still so much taboo, massively in across the cultures, you know. So it's always like, if I was to go to Nigeria right now, it would be literally, you can't be gay in Nigeria. Well, who else am I supposed to be? You know, and it's that type of thing that stops a lot of people of colour from coming out, because they just don't need that added layer. You get pressure from your family, you get pressure from society, you're literally getting pressure from everybody around you. And this is why, you know, as, you know, LGBT plus, we create our own families, because that's where we feel safe. And without that, our own little families that we make, you know, if you come from a family where they're like, don't worry, it's fine, great, you're blessed. But for people of colour, a lot of the time, it's not that way. And therefore, you have that threat of being disowned by your family, your parents, whatever. And on top of that, then being disowned because of the colour of your skin and discriminated against. So it's just that added layer, that added frustration of something you have to get through. And it's just a battle every day. But I've always, you know, being 45 years of age now, I know I look good, but being now of the age that I am, I've blessed myself in terms of, look, whatever comes my way, I know who I am as a person. You can't take that away from me at the end of the day, no matter what you think. And it's like you said, sometimes it's just having a conversation. Like, I'm one of these people that if I have somebody that's discriminatory, I'm like, okay, well, where does that come from? Because, you know, we have these influences, but these influences are in us as we're growing up. So my conversation is, oh, okay, that's interesting. What makes you think that? Where does that come from? And then you start having that conversation, and it does take time. But unless we start having these conversations, we'll be stuck where we are.
And visibility plays an important part in starting that conversation.
Massively.
I mean, I guess with trans people at the moment, we're in the headlines constantly, being attacked by the media. And unlike sexuality, you can't be trans and not be visible. To be trans, you have to actively challenge everybody's notions of what gender is. And in doing so, you are starting those conversations. Rebecca, how have you found creating space?
I think the same. I agree with everything everybody has said, but also I think it's important for other people in the organisation to realise that LGBT plus community is a community, but it's also separate as well. So don't assume that I want other people to not assume the men are talking for us as well. We've got our own voice, and it is different, and everybody is different. And for me, being bisexual, I've got a different voice than gay women as well. And that we're all we shouldn't be lumped together. That's really important for me. And I think sometimes it is assumed that we will talk for each other, and we can't, because I don't know everybody else's experience. So I'd like a little bit more listening and a little bit more understanding, and looking around your table and having a bit more diversity and a bit more inclusion. If I'm being honest, I think we are in a good place, and I know sometimes we beat ourselves up because the headlines aren't always good. But when I look at some private organisations, this is a pretty good place to be. I do feel safe here. I think I feel safer here than I would working out in some private companies. But I think we can always strive to be better. And for me, it is just around listening to all the voices at the table, and not just assuming one person is speaking for a whole group, because we are all different, and there are different facets, and it's, well, intersectionality is the word, isn't it? Really, we it plays a part in our lives, or in all of our lives.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the thing is, you've all had very different journeys to get to where you are today, both personally and in terms of your careers as well. So based on your experiences of being queer, what would you change internally that would have helped you when you came out, or potentially could help others? Hannah, if you want to have a go at that one.
I'm going to tell the little story of how I came out. I decided to come out at work because I'm very fortunate. I'm someone who could pretty much pass as straight if I wanted to. And I come from a family that hasn't got the highest opinion of the police. I've joined the police to try and do a good thing. And when I joined, I kept it to myself through training school, because there was no one else in my entire intake who was openly gay, or in my case, pansexual. But when I arrived in my first posting, I was very conscious of the fact, I'm finally amongst the real police officers. What will I do? And I'd had my family warning me about how the police are racist, how the police are sexist, they're homophobic. I need to keep it to myself. I need to keep myself safe. I was very fortunate. I was very lucky. I arrived on a team that had an openly bisexual woman on the team, and an openly gay woman who'd actually just married her wife. So I arrived the week after her wedding. The entire team's been to the wedding, and they're just talking about it. And when it eventually comes around to them asking me about whether or not I have a partner, I say, oh, well, actually, I'm in a relationship with a woman. And they go, oh, okay, cool. And for me, I think it's visibility, like you were saying. It's about being able to see, oh, hang on, it's okay. So I think there needs to be more visibility within the police, especially for new people coming in, because, before my current role, I was a tutor, and there's so many misconceptions built before people arrive in their first postings, or before they even attest at Hendon. And we need to be challenging those misconceptions. They're cultivated by the media, if I'm honest. There's a very, very strong narrative that you can't be the Met is not a safe place to be if you are diverse in any kind of way. And that's just simply not true. Yes, I've had bad experiences. I know many people who've had bad experiences, but it's a really safe place to be. If someone does something bad to me, there will be consequences. You know, if someone says something that's inappropriate, there will be consequences for what is said. You know, whether or not they're the consequences, I agree with it's up for debate, but I think it's that visibility and being there as a role model. I know I've done it for hundreds of recruits that have come through my borough when I was a tutor, and it's about being present and being there for people to see that they can be who they want to be.
Yeah, and I suppose it goes back to what you're saying, Rebecca, about having a voice as well.
Definitely, definitely, and not making assumptions. I'm constantly coming out, because if I've got a female partner, people assume I'm gay, and if I've got a male partner, people assume that I'm straight, and it's very gender based, their assumptions. So I find I'm constantly coming out. Sometimes I find that easier than others. What makes it more comfortable? I don't know, just the people that I'm with, and if they accept me for me and I feel comfortable in that space, then I'll happily have conversations about the gender of my partner. And if they want to ask me more questions like the rest of you, I really don't mind. If they're, to be honest, even if they are offensive questions, that person doesn't think they're offensive, it doesn't mean any harm, I'm really happy to answer those. But then I can be in other spaces, and I don't know what particularly makes me feel uncomfortable. I think if you've got to be a certain way, and this is inside and outside of work, if you think you've got to be a certain way or act in a certain way, it makes you less likely to want to sort of divulge more of yourself. So I think making it a comfortable space to be will help people, and we talk about bringing your whole self to work, and if you can bring your whole self to work, I think it's more natural. You'll talk about it in a natural environment without even thinking about it, and that would be my perfect position. And I have had that recently as well here. So that's how I think we can make it sort of a better place. Just make it a comfortable environment. Your immediate working environment, make it a really kind of happy, comfortable place to be, and it can be done.
And normalise it.
Yeah, definitely.
Kate, how about you?
My family weren't particularly pleased about me being a police officer or being gay, so I'm a huge disappointment to them. But actually, I did find solace in the police. With like you're saying, you kind of make your own family. I know it's obviously different to what you're saying, but they did play a big part in my support network. When I didn't speak to my mum for a very, very long time. Most certainly when I had my son, that went on even longer. So I've had my own external challenges that I always throw myself into work. If there's anything going on outside of work, I'm always at work to cope with it. I don't know why it's backwards. So I have found that, and again, I can't try and. I get really, you all know, I get really ranty about things, and I hate anything that is that has inequality in it. But I really reflect on the Met and my time in the Met, which is 20 years this year, and the vast majority of people are good people. The vast majority of people couldn't care less. I bring my son into Hendon. They love him. They all make a fuss of him. They all, want to meet him. He's quite happy to chit chat to everybody, and he'll out me when we're out. I've got two mums, he said in a soft play once, and I was on my own. I was like, oh no. And I am probably, if I weigh it up, going from what you say, if I risk assess when I'm outside, I risk assess. And I think we all do that quite constantly. We risk assess when we're in public. So I am not a fan of public displays of affection, because I'm watching to see the facial expressions to see whether anyone's going to kick off, because I've got my son and my partner with me. I don't want to have to then go to police mode and have to deal with that. And I have recently me and my partner in the pub, and someone referred to us as a pair of dykes, and I ended up telling him I would forcibly remove him from the pub myself, but fortunately my friend owned the bar, so she did it for me. But we're still having to go through that, and that was a couple of months ago, so I've actually find it, I guess, to some extent a lot easier to be out at work. You just have to contend with the occasional comment, I think, and the over inquisitiveness of some male colleagues that I've had over the years. And 20 years is a long time to be in any job, isn't it? So you move around. There's a couple at Hendon. It's quite a big, 800 people. I think I've had 2 people that have been quite rude to me because of my sexuality, but the other, 798, quick maths, have been absolutely wonderful, and I've met some incredible people. So I do actually find it easier to be out at work than I do outside of work, which on reflection is probably good for today, I think. Nice and calm, yeah.
I guess like with everything going on in media, people forget the Met can be like any other organisation. You would get discrimination in any organisation as well. Carleen, how have your experiences differed or aligned?
So I think after 20 years doing this job, and I thought very hard going through, you know, as you go through the years, how things have changed in the Met. And it has got a lot better than what it was. But for me, the biggest thing at the moment that holds the Met back is the need to conform. And that is the need to conform with certain pockets of people that think it's funny to address people by something that they know is going to be derogatory to that person. And that is the problem that we have right now, is that conforming. You don't have to conform to be in the Met. Just be your authentic self. That is what we're asking for, you know. And those pocket of people, hopefully we're going to create a culture where we breed them out. Do you know what I mean? Where you can't hide anymore because nobody thinks you're funny. Do you know what I mean? And people are going to challenge you. And therefore, this isn't the job for you. This isn't the right place for you. And hopefully, I'm hoping in how many years' time, it will happen. Because we're just on that first hurdle of getting to that point. Yeah. But it's getting momentum, but we just need to keep going. We need to keep going with it. Because the more we keep going, the more we can say, look, if I want to join the Met, if I'm this person, I know that I can't join that Met because I'll be seeded out. I'll be like, see you later. Do you know what I mean? I won't even get my foot through the door. And that's the culture we're trying to create, and we have to create.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to something that was mentioned earlier about intersectionality. And whenever we talk about people, we have to bear that in mind. I mean, being queer is just one facet of our identity. So do you think that there's a risk of too much talk about LGBTQ plus or not enough?
I think it's nice to change the narrative from gay men, to be honest. Yeah, I think it's you hear the LGBT community and you think of a gay man, but actually, I loves. You know, you've me with a child, you've got bisexual, recently married, black woman. Like, let's bring us together and hear our experiences. And we're all really passionate and nice, good people who've all joined to make a difference. And in our own ways, in our own departments, we all do that. And we're passionate about it as well. So hear more from us.
Definitely. Actually, something you mentioned got me thinking. The other day, I was thinking, why do people just, by default, call it the gay village? Like, that's it, isn't it? It's like, it's LGBTQ plus village, queer area, whatever, but it seems to default to gay, like gay pride. That's another thing that just rolls off the tongue as well. Rebecca, how have you found, do you find that that's a thing as well, where we need to make space?
Definitely, but also, me being bisexual is just one part of me. There are other parts of me as well, and I wouldn't say one is more important than the other. Sometimes during life, one becomes more prominent than the other, but there are other aspects to me. I'm a perimenopausal woman, and sometimes that dominates. So I don't think I can say one is more important than the other, but we are all made up of different facets. It's important to remember that, and not, like I keep saying, lump us all under the same umbrella. Come and talk to us individually and find out what our experiences are, and don't just assume that all four of us are the same. We're completely different. Amazing women, and each parts of our lives will become to the forefront, because if you have a problem with your son, for example, he's going to be your number one all of a sudden. Being gay won't even come into that for you. So it's just different. We just get on with life. I don't walk down the street thinking, there's me, I'm a bisexual woman. I just think, here's me.
Yeah, it's like, a lot of people seem to think of intersectionality as, you know, like Venn diagrams where you've got the circles, but they're not static circles. They're not always going to be the same size constantly. And if something happens, one circle might get a bit bigger, others might kind of diminish just to make way for that. And it comes back to what you were saying about talking to people about who you are. So do you think there is too much focus on LGBTQ plus identities?
That's a really tricky question to answer, because do I think there's too much focus on trans issues in the media? 100%. You know, they affect a really small percentage of the national population, and they just need the amount of attention that's put on that by certain elements of the press is unnecessary, and by the population in general. But I think exactly what Kate's saying. There's too much an emphasis on the LGBT male experience. There needs to be the women's experience needs to be there at the forefront as well. I think in the Met specifically, it's kind of tricky because there are so many more men than women. As a result, most of the LGBT staff support, staff associations are dominated by men. And it's just about us trying to carve out that space, like we were saying earlier, so that we can make sure that we're represented at the table, make sure that we're represented in the conversations around policies, to make sure that this is a safe space, so that we do take into account the intersectionality, the difference in experience between, you know, queer women versus queer men, because it is a very different experience. Like touching on some of the stuff that you mentioned earlier about the feminization of certain elements, the idea of it being dirty for men, whereas for women it's a very, very, very different way of existing, and I think that needs to be taken into account more. So while I'm saying that we are speaking too much about certain issues, I think there needs to be a repositioning.
Not
almost.
enough of the others.
Yeah, it needs to be balanced. It can't just be we're going to focus on the bits that the media are intense about and not the others, and we can't just have policies that are written by men, because they don't work for everyone. But this is what I've found. They ask questions of the wider committee. They come up with a load of suggestions that are all gay men focused. And I sort of throw out a list of, well, what about this, this, and this, and this? And they go, oh, those are really good ideas. We didn't have thought of that. I'm like, yeah, it's because you're all of the same demographic.
Yeah. I work with an officer who apparently is a gay ally. So he calls himself LGBTQ plus ally. But then when those figures came out, it was really funny because we was having a conversation in the office. And the first thing he said was, I don't believe that bisexual, that many people, I don't believe. And I'm just like, and you know, you sit back and you go, when I first came here, you said you was an ally. Yeah. Where's the alliance? Where is the alliance? Because how can you, this has obviously been something that's been conducted over a couple of, years, whatever, but this is something that's been conducted and these are the figures. How can you then sit there and go, I don't believe that? Why? Because it's something that you disagree with or doesn't fall into your, do you know what I mean, category of, it was very, very interesting. And I just sat back and went, really? Really?
But that's biphobia, isn't it?
But
It's bi-erasure, it's all of those things. And people are very quick to jump to the idea that experience doesn't exist.
What we can be open to, I think, is if we're willing to learn, is cognitive diversity. Like, I don't need to be black or Asian or brown or anything else. I don't pretend to know what it's like to walk in your shoes, but what I can do is think, that would be useful to Carleen. There's an event going on in Bristol. So, and I don't know why that's limited to, I mean, maybe we're just more empathetic, I don't know. But I can think with my, I don't need a demographic diversity if I've got, or as well as cognitive diversity, because that shows real, progress, doesn't it? To be able to, although it doesn't affect me, I'm still going to think about that person. If bisexuality doesn't affect me, but if I don't say something, she will kick me, and that scares me. So there's that cognitive diversity of having Becca in the back of my head saying, "What about the bisexuals?" And it works, and the guys can do the same. It's
passing the mic, isn't it?
Yeah, and some guys do. To be fair,
yeah, they do.
We have got some really good people out there who are advocating for us. Really, really good people.
Yeah, definitely. We do.
And that's the word, advocating for us.
Yeah.
Actions speak louder than words.
But this is the thing, is I think, for my personal opinion, is that the way diversity and inclusion is handled generally, not just in the Met, is it's very exclusionary. It's very shouty, very, you must not do this, here's a list of words you can't say anymore, you have to be careful, you get this right, if you get this wrong, you're going to get shouted at. There's a lot of fear based on it, and you must behave this way because. And I think, it comes back to what I said about conversations, things like that. It's about building that trust that people feel open and willing to, I don't know, feel safe in their almost lack of diversity, if that makes sense. Because it might be that I know plenty of straight white men who have been really worried when they found out that I was not straight, because they go, oh God, she's going to be all like on me and I'm going to say something wrong and I don't know. And they've then told me this later on when they've come to know me a bit better and we've had a conversation and I've gone, actually, hang on, mate, like, what were you worried about? And I think it's about that narrative, isn't it, of like having building people up to be better allies, because I don't think we tell people what a good ally looks like. And we just tell them, don't do these things, or do these things. If you don't do them, then you will be in trouble. And it's about changing the narrative a little bit on the diverse.
Yeah, I don't even know whether I like the word ally, because too many people are using it now, and it's like, well, what does it mean? We need a different word, because they're using it, but then not, like you say. I think actions need to speak louder than words. Don't call yourself an ally and then sit back and listen to those conversations without speaking up.
It's got to be earned, hasn't it, at the end of the day?
And that's exactly my response to him was, well, what have you done for the LGBTQ plus community? Silence.
Well, going back to something you were saying, Kate, empathy. Like, as queer people, we've gone through a certain lived experience that affords us a certain lens in life. Do you think that that viewpoint is brought into your work at the Met to help you see things differently?
I think, do you know, actually, I know I keep banging on about it, but I think it's not necessarily work or my experiences as a gay person. It's being old. So I have a theory: you're not really an adult until you've been an adult longer than you've been a child. Right? Quick maths. Come on, 36. Yeah, technically. And I think when I got to so I'm 40 this year, but throughout my 30s, and I will give credit to my son actually, because I had to grow up. I had to learn how to be a better person, to unpick my childhood, unpick so many things. I was raised in a racist, homophobic, working class family, and I've had to really do a lot of unpicking to understand why I have, because I still have unconscious, well, actually it's conscious bias, I would call it. It's very much there because it's ingrained in who I've been dragged up as through my childhood. However, I look at my son will challenge you straight off. He won't have it, he's 10. If my dad or his wife says anything, he's like, no, you're not allowed to say that, you can't say that, that's wrong. Do you have any idea how that person would feel? So I'm very proud of the young man that he's turning into, but it's him, I think, really, that has given me the want and the need to be able to look at and understand how I can be a better person, and I try and bring that into my work. And I look at how I've let things go through the first 10 years of my career, 12 years of my service, of not challenging people or not speaking up or not teaching or whatever. And I've gone along with it because I wanted to belong, because I didn't have a family to belong with or belong to. But now I'm kind of ashamed of that person, but I use her as an experience of how I can have conversations, of how I can make people understand my point of view, because I was that person.
Yeah, so using it in quite a retrospective kind of way.
Yeah, and that's where I think a lot of my empathy has come from. I'm empathetic towards myself, 10 years ago, 10 years ago. And I think actually, it's a lack of education in certain areas. It's a lack of understanding of who I am as well and what makes me tick. So yeah, I'd say not necessarily being gay, but my whole experiences of being a person is what's made me more empathetic. And I just can't stand inequality. It drives me insane. Who knew? Anyone who knew me when I joined the police would have been like, you are not this person. But I can't. I love the work I do because it helps people. It brings people together. Even last week I had a girl in tears. She's like, I've needed to find this group for so long. I'm a gay woman. I've adopted a child, and I don't know who to talk to. Who else gets this? So I'm like, right, put you in touch with them, She's now got a support network she never had before.
Amazing. How have you found it?
Yeah, I think Kate's right. It's you as a person, not just your sexuality. So, but specifically my sexuality, people make assumptions about me, as I've said, and I use that to then try and not make assumptions about other people. I do slip up sometimes, but I try and not make assumptions about other people as well. And that's my colleagues, but also when dealing with members of the public or communities, not make assumptions and take at face value the person standing in front of you, rather than make assumption. It doesn't matter what walk of life they are, or what they look like. Let's make an assumption. Let's talk to them as a human being. And I take that very much. I look at my experiences of people assuming about me, how that's made me feel, and I think, well, I'm going to try my best not to do that. So I kind of actively try and get any preconceptions out of my head so that I can talk to the person standing in front of me, and not all the things that have intrinsically been built by family or just environment or friends. Try and get their voices out of my head and talk to the person in front of me. So I think it's been really useful and really important.
Yeah, and that's something I guess in the media you don't hear about.
No.
The fact that that's, you know, you're bringing your authentic self to work that allows you to treat people better at the end of the day.
Yes, yeah, and we're not all racist, homophobic, misogynistic people that the press would have you believe. 99.9% of the police and police staff are amazing people here to do a really good job, but that's not what the press would have you believe. We're an organisation of 43,000 people. We aren't going to, you know, we do need to be held to account completely and utterly, but we are decent. I don't remember the last time I came across somebody that goes to work thinking I'm going to do a really bad job today or I'm going to be homophobic today. Generally good people who I would risk my life for.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like when you look at the size of the organisation, if you think about an organisation of a similar size, you're bound to get the negatives as well. And let's face it, at the end of the day, happy news doesn't sell papers. And that's why the media reports and focuses on such a small element of it at the end of the day. Carleen, how have you found your lived experience and whether it's helped you in your work?
I mean, my lived experience, I came in the Met having quite a lot of experience. You know, I was a child of domestic violence and stuff like that. So that safeguarding people has been my thing in the job and helping people. And that's the reason why I joined the job. And also, obviously, the depiction of, well, there's not enough people of colour in the job. So if it doesn't start with me, who else is it going to start with? And so when I used to get that kickback of, oh, well, they're racist, the actual racism came more from people of my colour than it did from my fellow colleagues, which I'm quite happy about, because what that tells me is actually there isn't this whole institutional racism going on, because you're just listening to, again, clickbait, what you hear in the media and stuff like that. To do this job is a hard job. So it's great when you have that support around you for people that don't care what you look like or who you are or who you're sleeping with or whatever, and actually you can just come to work and do a good job. But following off from what you said, Kate, earlier, for me, it's all about what I tell the new recruits that are line managers. It's all about humanity. At the end of the day, if you stop a person, treat a person, how would you want to be treated if you were stopped by an officer? It's not that difficult. If you have respect for people and you are humble when you are doing your job, you'll be happy in whatever you do, and the public will be happy with you too. Because it's not all about this roughy tufty. Those days are gone. They're shelved. That's like archaic. Nobody wants that anymore. And then they treat people how you want to be treated, and it's that simple.
And at the end of the day, you don't have to understand someone to respect them. Exactly. It's really straightforward stuff. Exactly. Hannah, how have you found it?
I think, I come from a position of immense privilege, and I think I've been fortunate enough to recognise that through the help of my friends that have had different experiences to me. You know, my partner's mixed race, she's had a very, very different lived experience to mine, and I'm able to bring that into my work so that it's sort of building off what everyone else has said, to be honest. It's about being able to come into work and deal with whoever is in front of me as a person with respect and humanity, like you're saying. It's about not making assumptions about how they feel, what their experience is, what they've been through, and putting them into a situation where they feel belittled or having their power taken away in a disrespectful way. I mean, at the end of the day, we have extraordinary powers to do things that are actually can be quite immense to people. You know, we can stick someone in handcuffs, put them in a van, and then lock them in a small room for days, if necessary, if that's what's decided. And it's about making sure that decision-making process at each point is informed with that willingness to understand that there's a different experience to us, that it is hard, and doing it with that respect. And I've just tried really hard to bring that into everything I do when I've been teaching people, when I do regular, stops on the street or arrest people. It's about having that approach, that willingness to treat everyone as a human. And I echoing what Carleen said as well, that mentality of coming to work and, coming to work to have a fight, or coming to work to put my authority on someone else, that's not why I come to work, and that's not why anyone on my team or anyone in my immediate sphere does. Those days of the days of that have gone, if I'm honest. I remember it from when I was new, which was 7 years ago, not that long ago. You guys are far more experienced than me. But I do remember seeing it, and I think it's dying a death, but we have to get there. And I think it's through things like this where we're talking about our experiences and building communities within the Met. That's how we will finally get rid of all of it.
Yeah, we're doing the work now so that those that follow us don't have to go through the same rubbish, difficulties, or whatever you want to call it, that we've been through. But as visible queer women, then, we're creating representation that we never saw growing up. So to anybody who isn't within the Met, who is possibly thinking of coming out, what would you say to them now, given your experiences and your lens?
Don't be scared. We'll look after you. Yeah. Don't be scared. Just take the leap of faith, and there's always going to be somebody there to look after you. Look at us. We're there to look after you. Amazing.
And as Kate was saying earlier, she's got your back. She'll have everyone else's back, and it's a team thing, isn't it?
Of course.
We are a family. When you come to work, you feel like you are sitting with your family, because you're spending how many days you spend more time at work than you do at home, unless you go on your leave. But we are a family, and we will support you no matter what you're going through, But I always say to the recruits, I can't help you until you tell me what the problem is. You have to make that first step, okay? And nobody's going to judge you. Everybody's going to say, okay, well, how do we solve this problem? How can help me to help you? Sounds cliched, but it's exactly what I say.
What I like about the Met, and what doesn't come across, I think, to people outside, is that we are diverse. There are so many different types of people here. There's always going to be somebody to talk to, and the picture painted isn't how it is. There's always somebody to talk to, and always somebody who will listen, is willing to listen. It's a massive place where there is a lot of support. I can retire in 5 years' time, and it scares me somewhat, because I'm going to lose that support network. So I don't know whether I will, because I love my job, I love what I do, and I'm incredibly proud, but also it's a fantastic place to be, and there is a huge amount of support here, and that's going to be taken away the moment I give in my warrant card.
But it's true, there's no job like it.
No.
You can't say it's like this job, or like, because it's not. It's like literally every job rolled into one. At one day you could be a social worker, one day you could be, I don't know, dealing with somebody that's bleeding out on the street. One day, it's just so many different elements of different professions that go into our job that people outside will never understand. So come join us, and then you'll understand.
But I think it's very much like, if people who are struggling to come out, and they're wondering about whether or not they can be out in the Met, your first posting will be on frontline policing, and the bonds that you'll build with the people that you work with and the experiences you'll have with them are like no other. It is a level of trust that goes beyond, it goes beyond words. I can't really find the way to describe it, because you would literally, as you said earlier, put your life on the line for the people you work with, and you know that they would do it for you. And that trust isn't just limited to that, it's also around you being able to be yourself at work. And the majority, vast majority of the time, they're going to treat you with respect. You're going to be able to, you can trust them to not treat you differently or be derogatory or anything like that because of your sexual identity or your gender identity at work, I would say, from talking to people across the Met.
So it goes beyond the chosen family that queer people are used to, doesn't it?
Yeah, but the problem is, I think, is the majority of the people in the Met are a demographic that we're naturally distrustful of, as the LGBT community. The straight white man is someone that we have. They have a lot of power in our idea in society, and you go into a response team where you might be the only queer person there. That can be a little bit scary, but it actually doesn't have to be. Those people will treat you respectfully.
But my experience is different, because I've suffered more prejudice from the gay community in my lifetime than I have the straight community. So I don't have that same experience. I was more reluctant, and Kate will tell you, I've only been more vocal as I've got more confident, and Kate and other people in the group give me that confidence not to judge me, but I've been massively judged and had some quite direct biphobia come my way from the gay community, not the straight community. So again, that's a completely different experience than yours.
Yeah, and I think like biphobia is its own thing that I can like I know that we all can talk about for a long period, like we can keep talking about that, but I think that idea of being able to be your authentic self around your team is generally it's a safe place to be.
Yeah, I think I slightly disagree with that as well, only because from speaking to bi women who've had some really awful experiences, and I think the thing that where there's the difference there is your gender. I think if you're a bi man, yeah, you might have some questions, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for a bi woman and for generally an LGBT woman, I'd say it's a balance again, because I don't want to say one thing and say that's what the whole of the Met's like, because it's not. But equally so, it would be wrong of me to pretend that hasn't existed, it hasn't happened, or doesn't still happen to some women on team, on frontline policing or in other departments. And it does. I think it's a small, let me try, because I don't want to lie. I think there's probably a bigger proportion than what there should be, which is always going to be the case. But still, the majority of people in the Met are good. But that does happen to gay women and bi women. You are over-sexualised, and it would be wrong of me to not say that when I've heard the stories from some of my colleagues. Yeah, and it does happen, but it is a huge organisation, so it would do. But I don't think we should accept that just because we're a big organisation. We have a lot of power, and we need to be trusted with that. But sometimes I think that it's accepted across society to be over-sexualised towards women generally, and towards LGBT women. So we're obviously recruiting from the wider society, so of course that's going to be present. And for me, I think we need to change the narrative there and lower the threshold of tolerance. And when you have any of that over-sexualised comments being made, or that comments that illegitimise you, that needs to be challenged all the time, not just educated of, this is how we have sex. We need to be challenged it. That's none of your business. I wouldn't ask anybody that, so why is it okay to ask me? And I think we need to challenge that. And I think that narrative goes around across the country. It's not just in the Met.
It's that dehumanisation, isn't it? Just because you're marginalised?
Yeah, objectified. And I know obviously I'm on camera, but when I was younger, this is when I was younger, not nearly 40. But I know that, some of younger colleagues still have that experience now. And I think the way to change that is to challenge that narrative and give women the confidence to be able to say, no, you can't speak to me like that. Don't objectify that woman in the street. Don't ask me about my sex life. Don't ask me who's the man in the relationship. It doesn't matter. And the same with gay men, who's Arthur and who's Martha. It's not relevant. Let's just stop all of that.
Plus, it's nobody's business.
It's no one's business.
It's not your business. I don't ask you what you do in your bedroom, so what gives you the right to ask me what I do in mine?
Yeah.
It's both ways.
Yeah. Or do you fancy her? Would you? No.
Do you want a threesome? That's always.
The thing is, we've moved on quite a lot. Like, if we consider back in 1969, the Stonewall riots, that paved the way for a lot of LGBTQ plus organisations, which ultimately led towards queer rights. But I mean, focusing on it from a queer woman allyship position. I don't know, we've spoken about allyship and that word, maybe like advocating. If you could give advice to any of your colleagues about how to be better allies for queer women within the Met, what would it be? Speak out when you hear it. Speak out and don't be afraid to. And don't assume that we are under the same umbrella and that my problems as a bisexual woman is the same as a gay woman's problems or somebody of colour, that we're all different. Listen to us, but mainly speak out. I think we call it don't be a bystander is what we're calling it. Then actually speak up for us and stick up for us and take time to talk to us and listen to what problems that we have and what our issues might be and who we are, and go and talk about it with your colleagues. Yeah. So being proactive. Yeah, just rather than just watching. Don't call yourself an ally because you've got a gay mate. Yeah.
If you don't understand, then ask. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing. If you don't understand, don't conform to this nonsense that other people do because you think your mate is funny. Do you know what I mean? Ask, because there's so many people that I've come across that I can see in their eyes they're burning to ask me the question, but then they just go along with the silliness because they feel a little bit, maybe, I don't know, maybe they're bisexual, they've not come out to somebody, but you can see, it's almost like you can read this urge kind of thing of they wanting to, well, I'm not going to, you come to me at the end of the day, because if I'm going to sit here in front of people that are basically taking the piss out of me, then I'm not going to be the person that comes forward. I will challenge you on it, but I'm not the person to be if you want a conversation later, a discreet conversation, I'm all for that, 100%. But I don't owe you justification at the end of the day. So, yeah.
I don't want people are too scared to ask you if you're gay.
Probably.
I've been wondering. I've been sat here thinking it.
Probably. No, I've always been brought up just to say how it is. There's good and bad in everybody at the end of the day. And if you don't open your mouth, then people don't know. Yeah. And it's having that first jolt of speaking, talking, do you know what I mean? And not everybody has the confidence that I get that, but do you know what? I will do it for you. If you want me to do it, I've got no problems whatsoever. I don't care if you're senior ranking officer, low, I don't give a toss. I'm seeing you for you as you should see me for me at the end of the day. And until we get to that level, I think we've got a bit of a steep to climb, do you know what I mean? And that's, just be yourself at the end of the day. If people don't like it, then I'm sorry, I'm not here for you. You don't clothe me, you don't put food in my mouth. I'm here for me at the end of the day and anybody else that wants help and assistance from me.
And that is the level of confidence I aspire to. So, Hannah, what about you? What advice or what would you want to say to allies of queer women?
So I'm going to say something a little bit different.
Go on then.
If you're going to refer to yourself as an ally or an advocate, that means you do it not just when the queer women or any group are in the room. You have to be like that all of the time. And I think I want to encourage as many people to be advocates or allies as possible because, and to be honest, there are so many out there already, they just would never use that label for themselves. But I think like we're talking about this conformity and this idea, if you are going to claim to be part of a support network or anything like that where you're advocating or, even just supporting individuals in the organisation, then you need to be doing that all the time. And if you're not doing that, you need to be reflecting on yourself as to why you're saying that. So I just think a little bit of reflection as to why you're using that label and also just being confident in doing it. If you feel scared to challenge someone who's making a comment, then you reflect on yourself. Why are you scared? If you're not part of that group, you don't have any skin in the game so much, to a certain extent, right? Just try and, I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but just try and be more confident with it, but also reflect on it at the same time.
Yeah. And that's important, isn't it? Like, allies, ask yourself, why are you an ally? Why do you call yourself an ally? And how have you earned that position?
And what are you doing to still earn that position?
Exactly, because we don't stop being queer outside of these calendar events. So, at the end of the day, they shouldn't stop being queer just because we're not in the room at the end of the day. I could go on. This is a fantastic conversation, but unfortunately, we have to wrap that up here. I'd like to thank Colleen, Hannah, Rebecca and Kate for giving up their time today. I've really learned a lot, and I think it's important that we carry on learning because that is the way that we move forward, we have those conversations. I'd like to thank the Met Police and Diva Magazine for making today happen. On behalf of everyone here, I'll see you soon.